Well, hello, folks. It's good to be with you again. We want to just briefly go over some thoughts concerning the next unit with chapters 12 through 16 of the text, and hopefully, again, provide just a few insights to go along with the readings and the PowerPoint slides from the authors as well. And again, if there are any questions, feel free to let me know. And with this chapter, or section, I should say, with this unit, with the section of chapters we're looking at the issue of IT innovation. It's a fairly recent kind of thing, although no doubt we've seen innovation over the years, but now it's seen as very strategic to an organization. And no doubt in your own organizations, you've seen some real benefits to an appropriate use of technology and new thinking and so on. And so hopefully these ideas will help you as you continue your learning experience. And so we mentioned three key things here. And again, I'm going to bring them out in a little different way than the authors do. I'm not sort of repeating everything they have, but I am actually calling out a few key things from what they say, and because I think these are important. And so IT innovation obviously looks at what is important, or basically what can be done, right? The importance of what can be done. And so that's important to see. And looking at the issues of innovation in relation to looking at the future, you'll see a lot of futuristic aspects to this kind of thing, innovation. Getting people to think, with a vision, sensing the future and so on. What's happening to the organization? What can we do? Being creative in our thinking and so on. So the importance of what can be done is what innovation is all about. And then, of course, we need to not just make new things, of course, but bring value to the organization. We can make all kinds of new things, which may not bring any value at all, in fact, may cost the organization, right? And so it's not just making new things. Again, it has this idea of being strategic, thinking ahead, sensing opportunity, being creative, but they bring value to the organization. We've defined value already. We already know the details of that, and so you should understand a bit about that. But then, of course, innovation requires a process as well. That is, we can't just willy-nilly make all kinds of new things or whatever. There must be some kind of process in place to make it a reality. There must be a way of letting employees know that this is very, very important. And this is the process we'll follow so that we can actually select which things really make sense for our organization, for our business. And so keeping these 3 points in mind as we go through these things together will be helpful relating to IT innovation. Now, as I mentioned, process will become very important. That is, again, we can't just do things off the cuff. That's, of course, what happened many years ago. People come up with new ideas and so on. And that was nice, of course, back then. But now there's so much data, as we'll bring out here in a little bit, lots of inputs to the process and so on, or to the company. What are we going to do with all this? And so we can always come up with more things that we're able to do. But how do we select innovative things, right, that will actually bring value to the business? And so there's a process the authors mentioned. I may use slightly different words here, but the process is similar. That is, first of all, we have to have ideas. But we ought to have a way of motivating people. And I have a little note, the issue of success at the end here. If we're going to have a successful process, then we have to provide appropriate motivation to bring ideas and to try things, right? Experiment and so on. And so we have ideas, ideation, I think they call it in the text. And then there's support, the idea of finding those who will be supportive, advocate for you, right? Paraclete, we might call it from the Bible perspective, right? That really will, take on and say, yes, let's move forward with this, right? We need to have this kind of support. And so, but it's not just a people support, but we need support resource-wise as far as funding, of course, being able to have space for experimentation and so on. We need these kind of things. And then, of course, a proof of concept. We need to be able to experiment and show an initial way this might work. And especially so many new technologies coming in. Well, which ones will work for our company? We can't use them all, of course. But having budgets and so on and process in place where people can try things will be extremely helpful. Most companies still really don't do that today. But there are many that are realizing the importance of doing it now. And then after the first initial test, the initial experiment, the proof, if it looks reasonable, then as part of that process, we pilot it, right? We actually give it a shot, right, and see how it's going to work before we go full bore ahead, we might say. And so then, of course, we do decide after the pilot to go ahead. We have a transition period. And of course, this all establishes the direction we should go, right? So you see, for success, we have to have ways of motivating, rewarding people for this kind of thinking, supporting them in their thinking, and giving them a direction, a process by which they can make it a reality. So these, I think, are great points that the authors bring out, and will be helpful for you as well if you're going to be involved in your organization, not just from an IT's perspective, but wherever you're involved, you'll see that this process likely will work with innovation, whether it's IT oriented or not. Secondly, they bring out the issue of big data. That is, we just talk about innovation in general, but innovation in different aspects now. And so big data is the second key thing they mention in this unit. And the reason we have so much data, of course, today is we have lots of social engagement. And so we have wikis and blogs and Facebook and Twitter, and you know all of them, right? There's a whole load of them, right? And so there's just massive data streams coming in. And often these are used by businesses, right? Customers are interacting in various ways. And so what do we do with all this data? Well, of course, in the past, it was, in many ways, was ignored. Or certain little bits were taken and the rest of it ignored. But now businesses are realizing, organizations are realizing the great wealth of information that can help us for the future, right? Maybe our customers are not happy about a particular aspect of the product. It's all over the internet, but we don't know about it, right? And so going back to these streams of data, we can find out where their issues are with a particular product and maybe come with ideas. Or maybe a user has said, I wish the product could do this, and we see that many times. Well, again, if we don't analyze our data to see that little element, we might not get it, right? And so, and so we have this whole new perspective, really almost a whole new domain, or at least it's been brought to the fore anyway. We might say it's been around for many years, but it's been brought to the fore, this idea of business analytics, business intelligence, sometimes called information analytics. And these words are maybe slightly different, but they're also used interchangeably sometimes by folks in the industry. So I won't go into the specifics how they're different, but generally the idea is we want to analyze the great wealth of data that we might produce some information via that analytical perspective, right? And produce what we might call intelligence. So analytics is a little different than intelligence, but the intelligence seems to be a result, right? That we basically have, as it were, a brain here, right? We analyze the data, and now we got some new intelligence for our minds, the business mind, we might say, and now what are we going to do with it, right? So big data is huge. But now, of course, with these new things and the new perspective on these kind of things, well, there are challenges, of course. And so how are we going to govern all this data? Who's responsible for it all? How can we make it consistent? How are we going to manage it all, right? Where will it be all stored? And all those kind of things, questions and so on. And how will it be massaged to clean it up and make it consistent so that we can actually analyze it and so on? Well, this all takes resources, of course. And so the governance challenge, just to maintaining it, having responsibility. But then, of course, how will all that data be used as a challenge? And who will have access to it, and so on. And what are the resources that will be available to make it a reality? The storage and the cost of analyzing and so on, the personnel needed with that kind of background, those who are familiar with statistics and so on. And then, of course, the culture might be the old school, right, which many organizations still are, that it's hard to take on these new things, right? Big data is a new thing, and we're not used to it, so we won't bother, right? It costs too much or whatever. But new cultures, of course, realize the great benefits to improving business. And then we have a short-term mentality, of course, in business, right? Well, what will be what's my profit for tomorrow? And that's what they want to know right now. And so it's a sad situation because organizations can miss out on great opportunities if they're not careful. Now, there's a third piece. Innovation with data, of course, now brings the idea of the customer experience. As all these customers are interacting with the internet and various social media, that provides, of course, more information or more data about the customer experience. And so, again, we have the customer experience can be dealt with, and, of course, they're expecting consistency, reliability from the business, and certainly analyzing that data will give us an idea right away whether customers are seeing a consistent experience. We know, of course, in many ways that doesn't happen, does it? No doubt you've contacted companies and seen the results. And one time you go to a company and boy, what a great job they did, right? Maybe a restaurant, for instance, right? Great food, the experience was marvelous. Next time you go, and it's the worst you've ever had. But why is that? There's not, it doesn't sound quite right. The experience wasn't consistent. So, and then you start talking about social media, saying, "Oh, how marvelous it was," but then, well, how a rotten experience I had, and then what happens? And so, this is why when you go out to websites, you're going to see so much inconsistent experience by customers with various restaurants or builders of various kinds, or all the review sites, and the comments are you're like, well, which is it, good or bad? You don't know. So anyway. And of course, your knowledge of your staff and having skillful people, knowledge of their product, of course. If how often have you called a place and the individual has no idea what you're talking about? Maybe they don't even reside in the country and they don't have a knowledge of the product. And you're trying to get an answer to a product, and it's just a frustrating experience. I'm sure you could tell me about a few of those things, and I could too. But for time's sake, I won't get into it. But certainly that's a very important issue. And then, of course, time. How often have you gone online or perhaps gone on the phone and you've called customer service? How long does it take? Have you ever looked at a financial institution, for instance, or a government institution and been on the phone for many days? Maybe. It's a sad situation, isn't it? Timeliness is very, very important. And, of course, just innovation in general. That is, we can use innovation to help customers and improve their experience. Whether it's an automated means or whatever, we can do that. But we also have to test them and look at how customers react to them and so on. It can't be just put in place just because it saves money. We have to look at these things very carefully. In addition, we have to recognize then that customer experience from an IT perspective is extremely important. And so we have to allow or provide a vision for creating a better experience, allow employees to think about that, motivate them to give us ideas, right? This is all going to be throughout what we're talking about this section. We're going to have this idea of motivating employees, helping them to create a vision for thinking through things, creating new ideas and so on, because that's all part of innovation, isn't it? And so making sure everybody's customer focused. What are we here for, right? That kind of thing. And then how do we design things? We often will put things in place to reduce cost. A new phone system or something, or new, automated phone system or that kind of thing, where we have automated messaging and so on, tell people to go to your website and so on. But how customer friendly are they? Have they been tested at all with customers to see if they're going to work? So extremely important, this whole issue today of user experience design. In fact, there's whole degrees now just on what they call UX, user experience, right? And so how you design things, how you design websites and customer experiences and so on are very important. And of course, how you manage the data from customers. Does a customer call in and say, well, I was wondering if you had a response to the question I had asked last time I called. And they say, well, we don't have a record that you called. Uh-oh, say. Has that happened before for you, say, or to you? So again, managing that relationship. Often people now or business will use CRMs, customer relationship management systems, which can be very helpful. They're not necessarily the end all, right? But they certainly can be helpful if properly implemented. And so there has to be a plan, a process for making this happen again. Like we'll say throughout our thoughts here, there must be the ability to make this a reality. Now we come to business intelligence, innovation from that perspective. And so this fourth item, we look at the issue of, again, the sense of taking data and making it into intelligible things, right? Things that can help us to help the organization. And so it's futuristic in perspective, helping us to anticipate, right? Or helping employees to anticipate what customers might need, what new products we can have, and so on. Sensing the future, as it were. Some people might call it intuition, but using data to sense things that are perhaps need to be improved, right? Asking questions and looking at focus on certain things and empowering the employees and so on. This is all part of creating innovation, business intelligence. And so we have to think of the future in these things. So I mentioned overall, there's many more your authors mentioned, but these are some of the key ones I point out here. And then, of course, we have to look at the fact that if we're going to have business intelligence, we're going to need something to get it from. That is, we need that big data we talked about, right? And so there will be various resources that are needed. And of course, and then there's just general needs. You'll need employees who have skills and those who are familiar with doing that analytical work and so on. And so we have to keep that in mind. And obstacles, well, obviously the skill set we just mentioned, of course, will be one of the issues. Our culture, the old school things, right? Well, we've always done it the other way. Why do we have to change it, right? That's another one, right? We already mentioned accountability. Who's going to be responsible? How is the process going to work? And so on, if we're going to make this happen. But accountability, no one taking accountability for the data and its massaging and its access and so on. And of course, having it available and who's going to have access to it and so on. Those are all issues that have to be dealt with. And then the unit perspective is, in the old school is like, well, I'll look out for my piece of the business, my unit, right? So I'm worried about marketing. I don't care about the rest of the place, right? I'm worried about sales, or I'm worried about manufacturing, or whatever it might be. And we don't worry about the business as an enterprise. And that's an obstacle. So we have to recognize the importance of the enterprise as a whole and think from that perspective. That's come out in our cases as well. But again, very, very important in this unit as well. And then we have finally our fifth item, IT collaboration in relation to innovation and thinking of the business value. We started with business value on the front end, and now we come to the end of our section, our unit, and business value becomes key again. And the issue of sort of the top line, not just the issue of cost savings, you know, and the issue of the bottom line, but the issue of the top line. How can I generate more revenues? Can I create new business, new customers, new product, whatever it might be? And those can help the top line, we might say, right? Produce additional revenues. Now, we can, of course, do cost savings. There is value to that. But we have to be careful. You know, what are we doing? Are we actually improving the experience? Or are we negating it by making, innovating by reducing and making worse the customer experience? And we'll lose customers. And so the savings we would have had, we've lost. Right? And not a good idea. Effectiveness. Are we being effective in our ideas and creating business value? Are they efficient? The process, again, we mentioned. That is, not every idea is going to be effective. You know, it may cost too much to implement. It may be worthwhile to look at, and you might, after looking at the cost associated with it, might say, well, here's what our return on investment is not going to be enough really to warrant doing it. We might get a little bit of profit, but it may not be enough. We have to look at, because we may not have all the resources to do every project, right? Even if all of them would make a profit. We have to take the ones that are going to produce perhaps greater profit. Then there's accessibility, of course. That is, when we collaborate, people are accessible to one another, there's more communication, there's a sharing of information, right, and so on. That's a real big benefit of collaboration. So not only do we have, we can increase revenues, make cost savings, make things more efficient, effective, and so on, but we also can provide accessibility with collaboration, and of course flexibility. When things can be done in a way that we can do it multiple ways because we have different ways of opportunity to do it, that's great to see. So anyway, these are some things to think on. The authors provide a lot more detail, but I just want to bring out some key things for you to think on as you look at your cases, as you think through how you're going to do your final project, and those kind of things. You might find this helpful. Again, I'm available for any questions, and hope this is a help to you. Have a blessed day.